Hi there. Welcome to Creation Station Monthly. I'm Bob from Creation Station. This is our monthly creative program where we talk about two creative people in a creative field. I know that's a lot of creating, don't you think around here? This month we are dealing with we're wrapping up our Veterans Day, Veterans Month stuff that we've been doing, and we picked prosthetics and devices to talk about. And we've got two really interesting people here that I want to share this with, so I'm going to bring them right up right now. Alan, you're from down here in South Florida. Tell us about where you are from and what you're doing.
Well, originally I'm from a small town in New York, a place called the Bronx, and came down to South Florida in 1990. I retired from my job up in New York then, and went into the real estate field. And then about almost 13 years ago, developed an infection in my leg and ended up becoming an amputee, which led to me becoming an amputee counselor and an advocate. And then, like everything I do in life, I go full force into anything I do. So there's not much. I've actually done an internship in our lab. I participate in building my own prosthesis. But the biggest thing that I do is I counsel military and civilian amputees, either just prior to them becoming an amputee or, God forbid, after a trauma.
And you didn't even mention it's South Beach Prosthetic Company. You got to mention the name of the place.
Oh yeah,
we want to get you guys in here for it.
They're my big sponsor. They're the ones that get me out in front of people.
And Marina, tell us about what your guys are doing up there, because you're nowhere near here in South Florida, as we mentioned in the pre-show.
Not really. No, it's about 30 degrees up here right now. A little different from. I work for a small company called FDR Center for Prosthetics and Orthotics. And I'm a certified prosthetist orthotist. I've been doing this for about 9 years now. I have a degree in mechanical and biomedical engineering, and then decided that I didn't really want to sit at a desk all day. And so I went into a field where I didn't have to, and it's been really wonderful. Alan, it sounds like your experience down there in South Florida has been really interesting. I'd love to hear more about what you do with your amputee patients.
Well, the nice part about the South Beach platform, we're a mobile company. The owner is a very innovative gentleman. He originally started off lots of years ago with Hanger, which everybody, if you're in the prosthetic industry, they're the Walmart of prosthetics. But we actually go and service our patients at their homes.
That's fantastic.
Yep. And when I became an amputee, I became a patient of South Beach. And one day the owner.
And Alan, that's been going on for a while now, I'm guessing, right? It hasn't been something new during the pandemic that you started going to people's homes. You've just been doing this all along.
We've been doing this for 15 years. This was what he started the company. He left Hanger, started his own company. It's pretty good tale. He started it off in his garage. He's a certified orthotist, prosthetist. He's still hands-on. We're a pretty big company now. We service half the state of Florida now. We have, I believe, we're up to 10 offices. At one time, we had almost 20 throughout the state, but like all things, they get scaled back, especially with the pandemic.
Yeah. And that's, so you guys have both mentioned, I'm going to let you go, Marina, and tell us, okay, you said you have a degree in what, and explain that to us. What actually is that degree in? Because does that sound like cybernetics to me?
So I majored in mechanical and biomedical engineering in college. And then these days, in order to become a prosthetist orthotist, so that's kind of two halves of the same field. Prosthetics is where you're making limbs for people who have lost their limb, arms and legs, and sometimes fingers and partial feet. And then orthotics is bracing for people whose limbs don't work correctly or have some type of deformity or pain that you're trying to support. So that degree is actually a master's degree now. So you need to have a master's degree on top of a bachelor's degree in whatever you want. There were people in my class who had done massage therapy, physical therapy, mechanical engineering, like me. I think a lot of people are coming into it from engineering these days. In the olden days, you only needed a certification. You could get it at a number of different places. Nowadays, they're requiring that master's degree. So I do have a master's as well.
Nice.
2 years of residency, take a bunch of exams, and then you can add that CPO. after your name.
Yeah,
Feels
we,
good
It's a
to
very
know
cool thing.
yourself.
and that residency is a pretty intensive thing. We have a residency program at South Beach. We actually a lot of the students from the St. Petersburg School in
Mhm.
South Florida, which is there's only one here in Florida, I believe, and we take on at least 2 to 3 students every cycle. I think the breakdown is you need one CPO for 2 students in order to have a residency program. And fortunately for us, our residents stayed on as prosthetists, orthotists with us, but it's a separate residency for each program. Prosthetists have to go a 2-year residency in prosthetics, and then if they want, they can switch over to orthotics and do a residency in orthotics. But eventually, you have to do both somewhere down the road.
Yeah, these days
Hmm.
people become a CPO, so they do both of those things. Yeah, it just makes you
So,
a little bit better candidate for a job.
so tell me about what's the difference in between somebody who, for a prosthetic, I think when we say the word prosthetic, a lot of people are just thinking, like you were mentioning, missing limbs or something like that. But what's really the difference between a prosthetic and an assistive device? I'm thinking along the lines of a lot of the stuff I do with augmented reality, virtual reality, and doing specialty glasses and stuff like that, that are really enhancing what you already have. Whereas you're doing something that replaces, or does it?
We try.
Marina is probably the expert, but if I was to give a layman's advice, if you ever saw somebody walking and as they lift their foot, their toe drags along the ground, it's called drop foot. And something like that would be an orthotic or what they call an ankle foot orthosis. And basically, it's a brace that would go on that foot to help support the foot from walking. And obviously, a prosthetic, or I wear a prosthesis. My first prosthetist corrected me because I said, "Where's my prosthetic?" He goes, "I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about." He said, "We're in the prosthetic industry, but you wear a prosthesis." And
Okay, cool.
and I wear I'm a right side below knee amputee. So basically, I have about 4 inches of my lower limb below my knee that's left after surgery. And like Marina would do, who's probably an expert at this, she would, depending on what technology she's using, would cast me, make a mold, pull a check socket, fit me. If you're using acrylic, you would make some corrections there, or if you had to, make a second one. Us at South Beach right now, I call it old school, new school. We're right now we still cast people that need it, but when we can, the majority of ours is we're using iPhone, I think 12s for scanning purposes. We have where we actually send a signal back, and the prosthetists on their laptop can modify right at bedside, send it back to our 3D printers, and by the time that person gets their prosthesis back to the lab, that check socket's already made. So we've gotten people. Matter of fact, if they're willing to come to the lab, if we could do somebody in one day, right from a fitting into a definitive. Pretty cool the new technology.
That's nice and impressive.
But Marina could tell you about the microprocessor stuff, the knees, the feet, the the new age stuff, and that's really cool. I see some of that at the veterans, the VA hospitals where they have the newest technology. I mean, it is really where if somebody's what they call a bilateral amputee above knee, where the knees are actually telling the gait or the stride of the previous foot in milliseconds. And then also now we have bionic feet that match up to the knees. There's a company called, it used to be Endolite, Brickford, that actually has bionic feet and knees that actually talk to each other. So the technology is getting off the charts.
Marina, we're in science fiction territory here now. Tell us
We're
about
getting
this.
there. Yeah, definitely.
So now, where do you draw the line as a professional in the field? Where do you draw the line from repair of something to enhancement / replacement versus advantages? I'm thinking the most famous example is probably the South African sprinter in the Olympics, who had the blades instead of regular feet. Everybody kind of knows that image in their back of their head, probably. Where does the industry kind of draw a line right now, or where do you think about that space?
It's a good question. I think these days, most prosthetics are still what we call passive devices. So if you think about a carbon fiber spring, that's what most prosthetic feet are. You put weight into it, it deforms the spring and then gives you back just about as much energy as you gave it. So you're
Okay.
not increasing the amount of force that you're giving someone in their stride. But there are devices that are coming out on the market that are actually powered, where you have a battery and a motor that actually gives you that push off that your muscle, your calf muscle, would do for you. And the same thing with there's a knee called the power knee that does that as well. So there
So now, are they trying to just make those human equivalents, or are you going beyond?
At this point, mostly just human equivalent. If you think about somebody who's a unilateral amputee, so they have an amputation on one side and a regular leg on the other, the idea is to make you as symmetric as possible so that you don't wear out the bones that are left in your body.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to wear the first bionic foot. It was made by Biome, and it was the first
Yeah.
matter of fact, it's in the Smithsonian, I guess, because of its new cutting edge. Me personally, I'm old school. I wear a Freedom Agilix foot, which is a high level, what we call K3, which is the way we measure somebody's ability to walk. And that there, when you put, like Marina said, I apply a certain amount of energy to that foot, and it pushes back, and it helps me propel myself. I happen to like the carbon fiber. The only thing bad about the newest technology, it has battery operation. And how many times did you wake up in the morning, Robert, and find out you didn't plug your cell phone in or your iPad, and now
Yeah.
you're on a dead battery? So having a microprocessor knee that's in default mode really is more of a hindrance than a help.
Yeah, I was kind of just thinking we were past that, though. I was kind of thinking like, regenerating, recharging the battery as you walk or something like that. That's
Yeah.
we're not to that
Yeah.
point yet with things?
Not quite. No.
Ah,
I know, right? Somebody out there come up with this.
oh, I'm certain it's out there. So I want to jump into a totally different side of this for you guys both personally. Tell us about how did you get into this field or being creative when you were younger doing this kind of stuff? Because this takes a special spark. I mean, for both of you guys, it's doing something along those lines, whether it's becoming mechanical or whatever. But was it something? What else was going on in your life that made it feel interesting for you to go out and do? Was it something that a parent inspired you or something, or whatever? In my own life, as a quick anecdote, both my grandparents were blind, and so we just grew up knowing, okay, you're going to help around the house, you're going to help take care of these things, but they can do stuff. They're not invalids. They are running their lives. And it's the same kind of thing I imagine that some people get in this field where, oh, now you need to be fixed, quote unquote. But tell me, where did that come from, Marina?
For me, so my father is an electrical engineer, my stepmom is a mechanical engineer, and my mother is a social worker. So
Nice.
yeah, so I always grew up playing with Legos and Connects and building things. And I love that aspect of being creative, of taking something and kind of making it your own. I got really into origami in high school. I did a lot of unit origami, designing my own patterns. And when I got to college studying engineering, I realized that I wanted to do something that would really help people. I was working as an EMT at the time and thinking about going into medicine, but I actually was cold calling companies looking for an internship, and a prosthetics company allowed me to shadow them for a day. And it was fantastic, everything that I wanted out of a career, this great combination of engineering and medicine and art all rolled into one.
Yeah, and that is just one of those things that I wonder about. I mean, in doing some research for this, yeah, that whole art aspect really comes up here in prosthetics, and that.
Yeah,
Tell us
Alan was
about that,
talking
Alan.
about too. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
for me personally, it wasn't something in my younger years. I meant I have a mechanical background. I was a part owner of a machine shop here in Fort Lauderdale, but not until I actually had limb loss in 2008 that it occurred to me that there was a movie years ago, Pay It Forward.
Yep.
On the back of my business card, it says, "There is life after loss of limb." I mean, everybody that I try to meet and influence in this industry or and my patients is that there is it's going to happen, whether due to trauma, disease, a birth defect, but you can get beyond it in the sense that with me, I'm the eternal optimist. You ever hear that story? Is the glass half full or half empty? With me, you can. My wife is probably laughing behind me, but my glass is always full, no matter what turmoil you have. And I guess my whole life, though, I've been a give back. I did real estate originally in Florida before I became in the prosthetic industry 12, 13 years ago. But I also volunteered with my local fire department as a first responder. And when I had lost a limb, the funny story there is the fire chief, and it's not a small city in Pompano, came to my hospital to let me know we're going to find something for you to do, when you get out of here. And I looked at him and I said, "What's fine? I'm going to recertify, and I'll be a first responder." He laughed, he giggled, he thought it was a great idea. Yeah, well, I did recertify. I'm certified to drive their apparatus. We have a rescue unit that I'm certified to drive, and we can do first aid, everything that any volunteer would do, and I'm still doing it.
Excellent.
Yep.
That is an
So
excellent thing. So now, what do you guys think about what society? I mean, right there, because you're both talking about the social aspect of it too. What do you think society thinks about in this field? Do they, in your impressions, is it a social thing? Is it assistive? I mean, it used to be called assistive devices, was the more common term, is at least for what I was used to hearing. What do you guys think society thinks about this right now, though, especially with all the veterans that we have that need the assistance?
well, I think in the past years, 20 years ago, it might have been looked as a stigma or a disability. Today, I don't think it's considered. As a matter of fact, my first prosthetist got mad at me when I said, "Oh, this is a disability that's not a disability. I'm not disabled." She got very angry at me, and I said, "Well, there's nothing wrong with having a disability. It doesn't mean limb loss all the time. PTSD is a disability to veterans, but you're right. With the amount of wars we've had since Vietnam, and most war eventually went from killing one soldier or another soldier to maiming and dismembering, because that meant if somebody died on the battlefield, they got taken care of after the war, after the battle. But if somebody got wounded, 2 or 3 other soldiers had to care for that soldier, especially in America anyway. We leave nobody behind. So
Yeah.
with that being said, we have so many. If you look at the commercials on TV now, it could be a Pepsi commercial. There's going to be somebody with limb loss in there.
Yeah.
And it's, to me, I have a prosthesis that I could well, Marina could tell you, we have pretty good cosmetics that we could do to our prosthesis. I have one that I wear when I meet my patients for the first time, but the one I wear, it's a black carbon fiber socket with black pylon, and then my Agilix foot. A young man saw me, maybe 10 years old, said, "Hey, Robo." And he says, "How's it
Nice.
walking with that foot?" And I had to think about it. I've been walking on my prosthesis for nearly 13 years. I don't remember how it is not to walk with it. It's
Uh-huh.
part of my everyday routine. So I don't think there's any stigma anymore. I think actually, people almost, say, "Oh, wow, that's pretty cool." What do you think, Marina? Because you're the real professional.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think the tide has turned, at least in the last decade or so, where people are much more interested in prosthetics. They're willing to ask my patients about what's going on with their leg, especially up here in the Northeast after the Boston Marathon bombings. There was a lot of press about the amputees who very, very unfortunately became amputees because of that. But I think it really drew people into the field to kind of say, you know, what is it like being an amputee, and letting people tell their stories, which is nice. Yeah, I get a lot of my patients who get people coming up to them in the grocery store to say, oh, how'd you lose your leg? And people are more interested now than I think they're stigmatized by being an amputee.
And Maureen, I want to ask, Alan mentioned, you know, having the black fiber carbon. When I was looking up some of this stuff, there's some gorgeous artwork out there now on some prosthetics. People are doing amazing artwork,
Beautiful
you know,
stuff.
tattoo type stuff and things. How is that up there for you guys? I mean, down here, we're in the big urban setting, you know, everything's around. I think you're a little bit farther out from Boston out there, so you're not quite in the same setting. What's it like up there in that kind of area for that? Are people looking purely at, you know, just utility? I'm going to cover this up with a pant leg anyway, or what?
I'd say it's about 50-50. Half of my patients just want a leg that looks like a leg. We can put a cover on a prosthesis nowadays, like Alan was saying, so we custom shaped them to make it look exactly like their other leg, and nobody knows that they're an amputee. But I do have patients, lots of them, who want something fun on their socket. There's a company called Fred's Legs that makes really interesting laminated sleeves that we can laminate into the socket. Flames, rainbow patterns.
Cool.
A lot of really great eagles, American flags for the veterans. Yeah, there's some really wonderful things you can do with prosthetics these days to make them really unique and yours.
The unfortunate part is, in this world right now with insurances, it's harder. I'm not going to name any particular insurance company, but where me is what we call a K3 ambulator, which is a high-level ambulator. They would like to eliminate that category, and they fight you tooth and nail. Matter of fact, even when we offer, and I'm pretty sure Marina's company does the same, whatever way the patient would like their prosthesis, you know, putting a logo in the lamination on the socket is no problem. Shaping, I have my other leg, I told you, looks exactly like my left side. And when I walk, when you talk about, I don't think I wore pants, but 20 times since I'm down here in 19, I wear shorts. It's Florida.
Yeah, it's Florida.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, I've always worn my non-cosmetically covered leg. Actually, it helps me get across the street. You know how that is, guys?
Tell us.
It shows up a little clearer.
They don't stop. With my one that looks like RoboCop, they all stop. You can hear the brake screech to let me cross. So it's.
And I'm guessing that the AI driving is going to notice those too pretty quickly for you. So what kind of equipment did you guys start with at the beginning versus what you're using now? Because you both said you've been both doing this for at least 12, 18 years now. So what kind of stuff has it been? Because I know it's been leaps and bounds. I mean, you just casually mentioned 3D printing and scanning with an iPhone and doing, I mean, things that 10 years ago, nobody would have dreamed of trying to be able to do.
Definitely not.
Tell us what kind of leaps and bounds have you guys seen so far?
Well, you go, Marina. That's really,
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you know, prosthetics started out Civil War era. We were using metal and leather, carved wood sockets. Nowadays, most things are acrylic laminated. The things that we make custom are oftentimes we're using scanning software that was not available 20 years ago. Has probably been available maybe for about 10 years now, but keeps getting better and better. Something that you can just plug into an iPhone and scan around your patient way easier than using this big clunky handheld scanner. So technology just keeps.
And how much of that can you do in-house versus you have to send out to outside factory?
Usually with the scanning, you would send the scan to a central fabrication facility, unless your company is big enough that they have a milling machine that can then mill the shape.
And do those come from, all of a sudden you just made me have this horrible vision of supply chain issues. And I'm sorry, your leg's not here. It's on a ship somewhere.
For the most part, we've been doing okay, I think, Alan. What do you think?
Well,
Yeah.
part of the new technology, we sort of as green as you could be, because there's a lot of discarded materials, unfortunately, in the prosthetic industry. We reutilize all our acrylics, we grind up, and then the new machineries that we have use the ground up materials and reuse it for our fitting sockets. But we're just waiting. We were a victim of the pandemic. One of our newest piece of equipment that we just ordered 2 years ago, which is probably obsolete by now, but it's not using filament; it's using resin. And
Oh, yeah.
so now we can actually 3D print the final socket as compared to pulling it in acrylic, and that's really cutting edge because you have to be willing to make a big investment in the machinery. And we use a central fab. Ours is right here in Davie, Florida. And because we're mobile and with the new technology, we just send, electronically all to central fab. Next thing you know, that 3D print. Actually, we have 3D printers in a lot of our offices. So for check sockets or the fitting socket, we could do it local, but then the definitives are all going to be made in Davie and then shipped to the individual offices. But it's pretty cool stuff.
Nice. Yeah, that is really I was not aware that we had something local like that. That's great. That's really nice. See, these are the fun things you learn on this show, everybody. Tell me about we're going to take it not to a dark place, but just to a slight twist for you. I want to hear what your guys' biggest failure is, because we always celebrate successes. And one of the way you get a success is to recognize where you failed and then fix it and go be better. What's the biggest failure you guys have had in this that you've had to deal with?
Girls first.
In terms of a field, the thing that frustrates me the most about being in prosthetics is how constrained we are about what we can fit by insurance companies.
Yep.
And I think a big failure on my part and a lot of prosthetists and orthotists' part is not getting more involved in lobbying. We're such a small field, nobody really cares about what's going on. And it's very hard for us to advocate for ourselves and make sure that we get paid for the devices that we fit, because we can't fit the fun, exciting new technology unless somebody pays for it.
Yeah.
We unfortunately have to keep the lights on in our shops.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
And pay our tuitions and our
to bounce off Marina, I'm also a member of the ACA, which is the Amputee Coalition of America. Actually, I'm one of the representatives here in Florida. The main thing how I got also involved is their peer visitor program, and I'm also one of their trainers. I teach amputees to talk to amputees. If I don't know if you were done, but I would give one of my negatives, because I do counseling, is that as much as I tell my amputees that they have to work hard, physical therapy, occupational therapy, they're under the impression, and I just had a big disappointment in my office today. Everybody thinks that they'll put the leg on and they'll just start walking. I only know of one case that from out of the starting gate that happened. That was me. I almost have to lie sometimes. It's called poetic license, I call it. I literally got up, put my prosthesis, my fitting socket on, which I didn't realize that it could have just snapped. It wasn't even fiberglass wrap. And I went out walking, and I just thought, in my mind, I started to walk before I got fitted. And that's what I tell my patients. You got to start walking. You know, I have a patient, he's 75 years old. I said, even if you were a slow learner, you're walking for 73 years. I says, nobody's got to teach you to walk. Just have faith in the product, especially on below knee patients also. Above knee, it's a lot of hard work. It's not as easy.
So now we talked a lot about feet here. Tell me about hands or other prosthetics that you guys have been working with. I know we're not quite at the, Star Wars, thing
Pretty
yet.
close. Pretty close.
Tell me about that then. Fill me in.
Well, Marina will give you the real technical stuff.
Yeah. Go. Yeah.
We have microprocessor, myoelectrics, fully articulating fingers, rotating wrist. The trick to that is the occupational therapy that teaches how to fire your muscles, whether it's your pectorals on somebody that's above elbow, and it depends how much of the limb is left. We don't flex the muscles. The sensors feel the voids when you flex the muscle. And I saw one guy, he was incredible. He was an above elbow amputee, and he had an articulating fingers and hands with pressure points. His wrist would rotate, his elbow would actuate. This guy, he was just a natural. I was in awe. It's really something. He showed me he was picking up an egg and it wouldn't crush the egg. He had that much control. It was so super. I was stoked for him. It was really, but Marina can tell you also, the average American non-military is not getting those devices.
Yeah, no.
They're getting a scapular controlled, or what I call the shoulder shrug. And it sort of looks a little cumbersome. It's heavy, whether it's a claw or a hand looking device. And that's right now what insurances pay for. Workman's comp may pay for a myoelectric articulating arm or a trauma, whether it's a car accident, if they had enough insurance. And of course, for our veterans, especially anybody that lost limbs as a result of war, they're getting the top-notch stuff. It's
good.
But the average American, you can't walk without two limbs. You can, if you have great occupational therapy, you can live with one arm. And you don't see a lot of Americans here in America with a lot of artificial. I would say every patient out of about 10 patients that come in with upper extremity limb loss, I say only 2 or 3 actually go ahead and get upper extremities, whereas 98% of people that lose lower extremities go for a prosthesis.
Tell me about that, Marina. What kind of other stuff do you do?
Well, the thing with upper extremity, there are a couple of things. One is about half, maybe half, I'm going to say half of upper extremity amputees are congenital. So they're born without.
Okay.
And they do really, really, really well without a prosthesis. And it can often be very hard for them to learn to use a prosthesis because the muscles in their limb, they've never used them before. And when you put a socket on somebody's arm, you take away all that sensory feedback that they had. And so a lot of people end up, getting a prosthesis when they're 2 or 3, and then just never really wearing one until maybe they become an adult and they want an activity-specific prosthesis. I have one patient in particular who likes to do CrossFit workouts. And so he just wears a prosthesis to do his CrossFit workouts. And the rest of the time, he's really, really functional with just one arm.
Well, Marina probably fits plenty of people when they get a upper extremity prosthesis. She'll customize the terminal end or the end. There's nowadays, if you play golf, there's a special terminal end for that. If you're a bicycle rider, where it grips the handlebars specifically, it is such cool stuff that people like Marina do. The prosthetists, I'm in awe of them. They're dedicated people to what they do, and they have to have very creative minds to continually, take the person and make their life better.
Yeah.
Now, do you think, Maria, you touched on this earlier. I'm beginning to understand now that we're really not at a loss of imagination and not even at a loss of the ability for a lot of this stuff. It's really a cost factor / insurance failure point.
Absolutely. Yep. Although
where does that happen? Tell me about that.
No, there is some aspect that we do need more engineering help in our field. Absolutely. Companies are constantly coming out with new devices that they are getting passed through Medicare, which is great. Means we can fit them to our patients.
Okay.
There's work to be done, both on the surgical end and on the prosthetic device end as well. So having, especially upper extremity, the big problem is control. So if you think of your hands, how many different motions you can do with each of your fingers and your wrist and your elbow and your shoulder all at once, you need a lot of points of control. And so what they're doing nowadays is called targeted muscle reinnervation. It's this really neat surgery where they go in and they take a nerve and they put it on an external surface like the pectoral muscle, and it goes into that muscle. And then if you put an electrode array on that muscle, you can kind of track every single motion of the arm and the wrist and the hand and use that to control the prosthesis. It's
very cool.
Intuitive. Yeah. But without that kind of surgery, it's very hard to find the number of control sites you need to have a prosthesis work intuitively.
What's the percentage you guys think is electronic of prosthetics now versus purely mechanical? Like we've done here in Creation Station, we've printed for the Enable project, which is, if nobody has seen before, you know what, I should share that up on the screen. I suppose I can just do that. The Enable project is something where you can take, and you can see this young man here with his 3D printed hand, where you can go in and take and build and 3D print any kind of a hand device kind of thing for people. Those are all very rudimentary, very simple, straightforward stuff that anyone with a 3D printer can help out. We've done some stuff for some people in South America, etc., where they don't have access to the healthcare we do here. But for you guys doing that, I mean, how much of that? What's the percentage from that very low end thing to, as you were saying, the top of the line, fully microprocessor thing? What's that range like nowadays?
Well, it's the 3D arms that we see a lot of times, like MIT had, they donated 3D printed arms for some kids. With children right off the bat, is I think an Outback restaurant. I don't know if they have them up in your area, but there's something called the blooming onion where you can peel off. And for children, they have to use inserts so to accommodate for growth spurts. And I have a picture. I think one of the pictures on my personal website is a child in the progression of all his prostheses as he's growing up. That's one problem. But insurance companies are pretty cool with that. They don't have a problem with that. There's another technology that's going to eliminate, well, it's old technology in Scandinavia, but new technology in the United States, osteointegration, where they're actually, I think the FDA just approved for above knee amputees, where they do a prosthesis device that goes into the femur, and then there's a connective device where you're actually walking without a socket, which to above knee amputees is cool, but there's still a lot of downsides to that. Can't get it wet that much. You can't go swimming in a pool or the ocean. It's prone to infection. On the upside, you're connecting an artificial knee, regardless of mechanical or myoelectric, right to your femur, and you're gonna walk. I mean, it's more natural. It's not as invasive. Imagine, Robert putting a flower pot up on your thigh and coming all the way up into your groin and up on your hip flexors and on your buttocks. It's, for my above knee patients, it's not comfortable, but I always use this gesture with my hands. Walking, uncomfortable. Walking's always going to win out. So it's, but the move is to make things easier and simpler. Marina could tell you probably her biggest complaint from patients is it weighs too much and it's uncomfortable. And in reality, most prostheses weigh less than the natural limb. It's just unfortunate the way we have, like mine. Imagine it more like a pendulum. I'm a what they call a locking pin fit. If they're ready, I have actually whatever I want: suction, vacuum. I like the old fashioned. I guess I'm a dinosaur, but I like that locking pin. When I hear those clicks, click, 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 it's not coming off. And the weight, my wife gets mad at me. I tell a story when I teach at some PTA and OTA, which is physical therapy assistant and occupational schools about prosthetics. And I tell them, when I first got my prosthesis, I thought it weighed about 20 something pounds. Went to Publix, put it on the scale. It weighed, at that time, I had a pretty big limb. It weighed 6.5 pounds. And I said, wow, I couldn't believe it. I thought the scale was broken. Well, 3 months later, I come home, I tell my wife, Vicky, her name's Victoria. Vic, she says, what? You're not going to believe this. The prosthesis lost weight. The truth of the matter is, I did my therapy. I did my exercising. I got stronger. My endurance, my stamina got better. And that's where we have a gap. And Marina could probably tell you where we fit somebody, it's a good fit, but they still got to put in that extra work. It's like playing the piano, or if you're an attorney, you got to read the law books or see case law. You got to put the time in anything, and it'll become worthwhile. So
How about that, Marina? How much time have you been putting in on this?
Oh, sure. Probably tons.
Sure.
She's pretty smart.
Yeah, the thing about new technology, Alan's right. The patients who really need it, we can justify it through their insurance companies and often get it fit, especially with lower extremity. Microprocessor knees have been on the market for 25 years at least now. I think the C-Leg came out in the 90s or early 2000s. Don't quote me on that. But there's a lot of great technology out there, but you do have to be at a certain level to be able to really utilize it effectively, because it is heavier and it does require you to plug it in. And but it's going to do a lot more for you than just a simple mechanical device would do. And so there is that trade-off between the weight of the prosthesis and the function of the prosthesis. And obviously, absolutely, getting a socket, that's the part that goes onto the residual limb. Getting a socket that fits correctly is the most important part, because if it's not fitting correctly, it is uncomfortable and it feels much heavier because there's that extra motion in there between the socket and the leg. It's not hard attached to the bone. So if it's not tight and it's turning,
Yeah.
it's not going to be comfortable.
So let me ask, where is the drawing line, I guess, for that? For, like, we've talked a lot about, arms, wrists, feet, things like that. I'm guessing transplants. Where I guess my idea is, where does the line go between an artificial transplant of something like an artificial heart, mechanical, versus a prosthetic? Where in the professional field do you guys draw that line for? Are prosthetics only on the outside of the body, or what?
The way we define it in our field, prosthetics are the parts that we're adding outside the body. There are internal prosthetics. Those are hip joints, knee joints,
Okay.
also called
Shoulders.
Yeah, teeth.
Yep. Yeah, without a doubt. The other thing is, I saw a documentary on it. I don't know how they did an arm transplant, and it's not that long ago. It's been within the last 2 years. And I would imagine trying to do transplants of human body parts, is getting a donor, and B, making sure that that's got to be, I don't know if insurances will just pay for it, because joining nerve endings and muscles and ligaments and tendons, I would imagine it could be $100,000, $200,000 in surgery bills to get something like accomplished. It always, in America, it always comes down to the old mighty buck. It's
And now that you bring that up, Alan, I do want to ask you guys, since you guys are both in the field and well versed in it, is it that the United States is advanced in the technology, but we're not advanced in the ability to give it out to people? How is Europe, China, Africa, South America? How are they doing versus us in the field?
My gut says, I think, and I know Marina may or may not agree, I think we're well ahead of all other places. I just had a patient come up, I think it was from either Brazil or Colombia, and if that patient couldn't walk right after surgery, with one limb, 50, 100 feet, they were disqualified for a prosthesis. Here in America, we're fortunate. Most people are getting some sort of prosthesis, whether upper extremity or lower extremity. On lower extremity, I don't know how it's up in your neck of the woods, but we're contracted with, I think, 3 or 4 dozen different insurers. Medicare is great. They'll pay for a microprocessor knee, especially if there's justification. Marina talked about a power knee. Imagine an elderly gentleman, he has an above knee prosthesis, and he had a hard time getting up when he had 2 natural legs. So that power knee, when it literally will start helping him stand. And, it's not great for everyday walking, but odds are he's not walking a whole lot anyway. But getting up and down, getting from a couch to a dinner table chair or something. These are all the important functionality is important too.
I think from a technology standpoint, even though we do like to rag on the insurance companies sometimes, they really do pay for quite a bit more than you see elsewhere. The problem tends to be that a lot of insurance companies will have a 20 or 30% co-insurance that the patient is responsible for. And because prosthetic devices are so expensive, a lot of people can't afford even that 20%. An above knee prosthesis will start at maybe $10,000 and go up to $100,000 from there. So paying, $2,000 to $20,000 out of pocket is a lot for some people, but people do find ways to make it work. There are a lot of really wonderful organizations out there supporting amputees and helping them to get to the devices that they need. And in a lot of countries, you don't even have access to this type of technology.
Yeah.
But it is nice to have.
Well, I think also a lot of prosthetic companies also step up. South Beach, I'm on the I have a target on my back from the owner because I end up authorizing a lot of prosthetics and prostheses, mostly lower extremity, to people without insurance. And he had to pull the plug on me because when I added up what we gave away last year, it was over $250,000 because the owner turned around and said, well, that person is going to benefit from a leg. And even he can't say no. I mean, he's a real generous guy. And there's a lot of companies out there that do that regularly and not for publicity. And we don't do it for publicity. I mean, God bless Hanger. They're good. But when they give something away, it's on the news.
And you hear about it, definitely.
But it's okay. That patient still got what they got. And that's important. That's why I love what I do. It's I deal with a lot of trauma hospitals, a lot of indigents. Today I was driving back to do this webinar, and I was almost late because I stopped on a avenue. It's called Dixie Highway, and it's in Pompano. And I saw a guy in a wheelchair, and I stopped. He had such a bad. Marina can tell you, it's a knee contracture. It was so bad. As much as we do knee contracted prosthetics, he was bad, and I wouldn't have been able to help him. But he didn't even have ID or now. I didn't even care about the insurance, but he didn't even have ID. We still got to get doctor's orders and stuff. There's still a lot of restrictions, but there's a lot. I'm pretty sure Marina's company and South Beach does it. If somebody's in need, we step up. There's Limbs for Life is one of the organizations in the United States. There's quite a few of them. And then the most prolific one is called GoFundMe.
Yeah, unfortunately.
I mean, there's a gentleman that works with us now. He's our IT guy. He was in between insurance, and his girlfriend started a GoFundMe, and we matched him dollar for dollar, and we got him his prosthesis. And now he ended up but I better talk nice about him because next thing I know, my phone will shut off on me. But but yeah, I mean, it's all cool. And I know Marina. I was looking at her face and the smile she has on it because I could see her when she delivers somebody their prosthesis, and they get up and they walk for the first time, maybe in a month or maybe in a year, because if they were diabetic, it was a long time healing. but you see that person get up and they see the light at the end of the tunnel, and that they're going to be able to get back to whatever the situation was just prior to the loss of limb.
Absolutely, Ellen. That's what makes our job so special, is being able to be in a place where we can help somebody get their life back. Yeah, independent.
Somebody asked me if I could run with my prosthesis, and I looked at them. I said, I didn't run when I was 30 years old. Why would I start running now with a prosthesis? It's an old joke. But then I stopped somewhere, and I never tried. Yes, I can run with it. Not like the Blade Runner in the Olympics. And by the way, it is not an advantage to have 2 below-knee prostheses in the Olympics, because that was the complaint. Having your natural limbs is still the way to go. So I don't advocate anybody having an amputation to do better in sports.
Yeah, no. Although, Mariana, he leads me into an idea here. One of the other terms when I was doing my research for the show today, for exoskeletons, and it kind of seemed like, okay, exoskeletons are not prosthetics. But how about that? How does that work in that field? It seems, with all of your mechanical stuff, it seems really closely related.
Absolutely. And I did work for a company at one point. We were thinking about going into exoskeletal fittings, along with Spalding, which is a big rehabilitation hospital up here in the Boston area. They're really interesting devices, and I think I would term them more under the umbrella of durable medical equipment.
Okay.
Prosthetics and orthotics also falls under, as do wheelchairs and walkers and all that different stuff. Dialysis equipment, I think, also falls under durable medical equipment. But exoskeletons are really interesting for people with spinal cord injuries. They really do augment what your body can do, more so than a prosthesis usually does. Yeah, and unfortunately, the last I saw, the technology is not quite there yet. I've seen people walking in them in a rehabilitation setting, and they're really great for rehabilitation of muscles and just training your body how to move correctly, the sequencing of motion. I haven't really seen one in the wild yet, but I'm excited to.
The thing that I've seen is mostly is through the VA, is they're trying to integrate the nervous system into those exoskeletons, where the brain is actually saying, take a step, and that's where it's at. And then also there is, I don't know if the term is correct, Maria, I have a swim leg that's actually an exoskeleton for that, where traditionally we think of a socket that goes around the residual limb, whether it's an artificial knee for above or below with no knee, and then a pylon in the foot, where the exterior is the supportive device between the socket and the foot. And I'm going to be building a new one shortly, made out of 100%. My old one's made out of acrylic. It's kind of heavy, but when you go into the water, it doesn't matter. But I'm making one out of, it's almost going to look, I just asked the lab to look into it. It almost looks like lacing.
Yeah.
Blue lacing, and it's going to be pretty cool looking. And I just have to wrap my brain around that I'm not going to have a supportive titanium pipe underneath my socket. I'm going to rely on this carbon fiber shell going down to my foot, but it'll actually reduce. And by the way, Robert and Marina can tell you this. A lot of times people say, make my prosthesis lighter. And they always say, how much lighter can you make it? How many pounds? Well, it's always ounces. It's never pounds. It's, the reason I have a black carbon fiber socket is that I probably reduced it by 5 or 6 ounces in the acrylic that we use to make traditional sockets, with the laminating and the laminating material. I eliminated a whole coating. I'm pretty sure they use technology up in the Boston area. We usually use aircraft quality aluminum components or titanium. But unfortunately, that all, depending on the company and their policies, bites into the cost of making a prosthesis. But down here, it's, the hot weather, it's, we got to make it as light and cool as possible. And also the technology is the way we connect. What was that? A dolphin's tail was a movie.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Hunter's Tale.
You said that, Marianne. Tell me about this now. You said that, Marianne. Tell me about this now.
Yeah.
Alan was talking about going in the water. I'm like, wait a minute. So wait, if you've got somebody, you could like put a fin, just put a whole dolphin tail on, and now you can go spend time in the ocean, go spend time in the pool on this.
They make
Yeah,
special.
and there are companies making them. Yeah.
I mean, I've seen the Little Mermaid things with that the women wear, but you could make a real tail. They could really work.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh
There's
man,
there's
now
a
we're really
company
competing in the
Maine.
Olympics.
Yeah. There's a company in Maine that makes a really fun swim fin. I think it's called the swim fin. And basically a socket with a big fin on the bottom of it. It's really great for below knee amputees.
Right.
Once you get above the knee, you need some extra articulation for the knee. And I was actually just with a high school class. They needed a design project, so we gave them that as their design prompt to see if they could make a swim prosthesis for an above knee amputee that would give them the range of motion where they could really use the flipper effect and not wear their hip out. And they came up with some really cool 3D printed designs. I was really impressed.
Nice.
Yeah. So there's, again, room for creativity.
Yeah, there's room for improvement, and we have a good looking future for us. That's what I'm hearing you guys tell me, which is a good thing.
Absolutely.
And the biggest thing is mindset of us amputees. It's like I said, when I was told that they have to take my leg, and my answer was, well, if it's going to preserve life, go for it. And I didn't even know anything about the prosthetic industry at that time, but I knew I'll be walking again. And I think that's why I went into the counseling end of it, because I do pre-amputation consultations for my vascular surgeons where it's a planned surgery. And I let people know, listen, this is not end of life. It's a bump in the road. And this has just been a bump for me. Unfortunately, growing up, I've had a couple of bumps. And sometimes I think my loss of limb was the least of my bump. But but I want to, Marina's, her young lady in this field is huge. It's I could see that her patients probably do exceedingly well.
We try very hard. They don't always make it, but we try very, very hard to make sure that they have the best quality of life possible.
Yep. And that's a self-determination.
Yeah.
One last thing for us, Marina, to wrap up on here. Kind of mentioned on that in an indirect way. What's the gender ratio here in the field? Is it more, I mean, nursing is way more female oriented. Being a doctor is about 50-50 nowadays, but engineering is way towards the male side of things.
Yeah.
How is it in this field for prosthetics people?
Yeah, it's a good question, actually. There are more and more females entering the field nowadays. It's quite apparent, actually.
Good.
I know my boss of my company, his generation, almost completely male. And nowadays, my graduate class was a little bit atypical, I think, but there were 8 women and 1 poor man.
Wow. Nice.
I think it's more 50-50 generally speaking these days.
Yep. I would think so.
That's a very good sign. That's good signs. Yeah, we did a engineering one of these a few months ago, and it was all women engineers, and it was like, yeah, see, they're not hard to find, folks. We can do this. We can pull this off. This is the library, so I do have a library thing I got to share with everybody here, because there is a brand new book that just came out that fits this topic perfectly. It's called Noor. Nendia Akofar. Korafor is how she pronounces her name. And it's all about someone who is an amputee and has 2 replacement legs and a replacement arm. And it's set in a slightly future Africa. And it just came out here in November. So if anybody is looking for a good read and ideas, because that book fits in perfectly with exactly what you guys have both been saying of how complicated some of the machinery can be. It talks in there about her struggles of having to learn how to use, and you don't just walk, and forcing yourself through that pain to get up and do stuff. It's a really interesting story, and it doesn't focus on the prosthetics. It just is part of who she is, and she's going through her life. And I was like, huh. And this thing just comes out 2 weeks before my program. This has got to be, I got to read this one now. So it was a really fun thing. Thank you both very much for being here with us today. I think everybody learned a lot about what the field can be, and hopefully we all seen some future for this thing. I know it's already been an hour. We've already flown right by everything. So let me throw up our final slide here again. This was Creation Station Monthly. Marina and Alan will have their websites up for you, so you can go follow and see what they've been doing out there. If you have any questions for them that you want me to forward along, creationstation@broward.org will come right to me. We look forward to seeing you guys all next month. Have a great time.
Thank you so much, Robert.